Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. My name is Daniel Ward. I'm 42 years old, and I work as an aerospace engineer. I live in Boulder, Colorado, with my wife Clara and our two kids, Natalie and Evan. My job often keeps me on the road, but every now and then I get lucky and finish up early. This time, I wrapped up a difficult simulation ahead of schedule. I couldn't wait to surprise Clara and the kids. I'd been gone for 5 days, and I missed them, more than I had expected. It was a strange feeling, being away so long, like I had a hole in me that only they could fill. I decided to drive home instead of waiting for the flight. There was a storm coming in, but I didn't mind. The rain would make it feel like I was heading back to something real. The roads were slick and dark as I drove through the night. I didn't mind the weather. I liked driving in storms. It gave me time to think, to sort through the thoughts that had been piling up in my mind during the trip. The conference had been a grind, and now I was looking forward to a couple of quiet days with the family, maybe even a trip to the Air Museum. Natalie would love that, especially with her interest in aviation. Evan, on the other hand, would be thrilled just to be out of the house, running around somewhere. I turned the music down a little, the steady hum of the rain tapping against the roof, the only noise left. I had so many plans in my head. This weekend was going to be perfect. When I finally pulled into the driveway, it was just past midnight. I thought about waking Clara up to greet me, but I knew she'd just want to get some sleep, especially with the kids having school the next day. I'd give them all a big hug tomorrow morning. I grabbed my suitcase from the trunk, my boots crunching over the wet gravel as I walked up to the front door. The house was quiet, the lights dimmed, and the warmth of home wrapped around me as soon as I stepped inside. But something wasn't right. I paused, my hand on the doorknob, listening carefully. I heard something faintly. Music. Upbeat, almost playful, coming from upstairs. Clara always liked to listen to music when she was unwinding, but this was different. It wasn't the usual jazz or classic rock. This was something else entirely, something unfamiliar. I frowned, my gut telling me something was off. I quietly walked upstairs, trying not to make a sound. As I passed the hallway, I could hear Clara's voice. Laughter, a sound that felt strange to me, a little too light, too carefree. I peered around the corner toward our bedroom door. I didn't know why, but I felt this tug in my chest, a strange mix of curiosity and dread. I stopped just outside the door and leaned in, hearing more clearly now. "I can't believe he still doesn't get it," Clara's voice rang out, filled with amusement. "I mean, the guy's a walking paycheck. That's all he's good for. Can you believe he thinks he's still in control?" My heart dropped. I was frozen for a moment, my mind scrambling to make sense of what I was hearing. "Don't worry about it," came a voice I didn't recognize. It was smooth, almost playful. "Once we're done with him, he won't even know what hit him. You'll get everything you want, and he'll just go along with it, just like he always does." Clara laughed again, but this time it felt sharp, almost cruel. "Exactly. He's so predictable. I don't even think he'll fight me on it. Just, it's time for him to go. You know it, I know it, and he's too dumb to see it." I stood there, my hand clenched around the suitcase. My breath hitched, my mind reeled. I never imagined it would be like this. Clara, the woman I'd been with for 15 years, the woman who had given me 2 beautiful children, was having an affair. And here I was, standing just outside the door, overhearing her plotting not just against me, but our entire life. I should have walked away right then. I should have turned and left the house, gone anywhere but here. But I didn't. I couldn't. I had to know. I needed to hear it all. "Once this is done," the voice continued, "you and I will be free. No more pretending. You can have everything, Clara." A sharp pain sliced through me. My chest tightened, the air feeling heavier with every passing second. I swallowed, forcing myself to breathe. I could feel the weight of what I had just heard pressing down on me, but I didn't let it show. I stood still, waiting, listening to the murmurs behind the door. Then Clara's voice came again, but this time, it was cold. "I just want out. It's been too long, and I'm done playing house. This is how it has to be." My stomach churned, the world around me spinning. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should walk in there, confront her right now, or wait until the morning when everything would come crashing down. I was barely holding on as it was, but the door was closed. Clara and her lover, Mark, were inside, and I couldn't make myself move. I turned and walked quietly back down the hallway, out the front door, and into the storm. The rain soaked through my clothes, but I didn't care. I felt nothing. Just the weight of her words, her betrayal, all around me. I stood there, cold and numb, with only the sound of the storm echoing in my ears. I couldn't go back inside. Not now, not after hearing all of that. But I couldn't walk away either. Not with everything at stake. I just had to figure out what to do next. I didn't know how long I stood outside in the rain, but by the time I walked back into the house, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving only a gnawing emptiness inside me. The storm had passed, but my head felt like it was still caught in it. I slipped through the door, trying to keep the sound of my footsteps quiet. The house was as silent as before, but I wasn't sure how long that would last. I needed to act normal, for the kids, if nothing else. I dropped my suitcase at the door, stripped off my soaked jacket, and hung it on the hook. The sound of my breathing was loud in the quiet house. I could hear Clara moving around upstairs, her footsteps light, as if nothing had changed. I walked into the kitchen, knowing what I had to do. Natalie and Evan would be in bed, already asleep after their busy school days, but I needed to keep up the act. I needed to pretend like I wasn't standing on the edge of the world, ready to fall off at any moment. As I opened the fridge, I grabbed a bottle of water, my hands shaking slightly as I twisted the cap. The cold liquid was a sharp relief against the dry scratch in my throat, but it did nothing for the weight in my chest. I glanced up, noticing the family calendar on the wall. It was filled with little appointments and reminders, but right now, it all felt like a lie. All of it. "Hey, Dad, you're back!" I heard Natalie's voice from the doorway. I turned, startled, and saw her standing there, her brown eyes wide with excitement. "I thought you weren't supposed to be home until tomorrow." I managed a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "Yeah, I finished up early. Thought I'd surprise you guys." Her face lit up, and she rushed over to give me a hug. I wrapped my arms around her, trying to push down the chaos in my mind. Natalie smelled like her shampoo, sweet and citrusy, and for a second, it grounded me, but only for a second. "Are we still going to that air museum this weekend?" she asked, her voice hopeful, completely oblivious to the storm that had just torn apart the life she knew. "Yeah," I said, clearing my throat. "Definitely. I promised, didn't I?" "Awesome! Evan's gonna be so excited!" She smiled and then glanced up at me. "Where's Mom?" "Upstairs, I think," I said, forcing the words out. "I'll go see her in a bit." Natalie nodded, seemingly satisfied with that. She turned to leave, but then stopped and looked back at me, her brow furrowing. "Are you okay, Dad?" "You look tired." "I'm fine," I said quickly, too quickly. I had to sound normal. She had no idea what had just happened. She shouldn't. She seemed to accept that, flashing me one last smile before disappearing back up the stairs. I stood there, feeling the weight of her words like an anchor, dragging me deeper into the dark water. She had no idea. I wasn't okay. I grabbed the bottle of water again, drank a few more gulps, and then leaned back against the kitchen counter, letting the silence settle around me. My mind was already racing through what I'd just heard. The betrayal, the plotting. How had it gotten to this? How had I been so blind for so long? Clara, how could she? How could she not see that I was right there, her husband, the man who had given her everything? And yet, it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. I heard footsteps again, and this time, they were heavier. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, leaning over the railing, her smile forced, but still there. "Hey," she said softly. "You're back early." "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual, trying to bury the storm in my chest. "It was a quick trip. How are the kids?" "They're fine." Her voice was calm, but I could see the tension in her eyes, like she was trying to measure something. What I knew, what I was thinking, but I didn't give her a chance to ask. I set the water bottle down on the counter, leaning back against it as I looked up at her. "Clara, we need to talk." Her smile faltered, just for a second. But it was enough. She was caught off guard. About what? I took a slow breath, feeling my heart race again. I couldn't let her off the hook, not this time. "I overheard you earlier," I said quietly. "You and Mark." Clara's face went pale. She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me, her lips pressed tightly together, like she was trying to swallow down the words she wanted to say. What are you talking about?" Her voice was shaky now, and I could hear the panic starting to creep in. "I know everything," I said flatly. "I know about you and Mark, and I know what you're planning." Clara's eyes darted to the stairs, like she was searching for an escape, but there was none. I had her cornered. "This isn't what you think," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen. No," I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. Don't make excuses. You and I both know what's been going on. Don't try to spin it." Her face was flushed now, her eyes welling up with tears, but I didn't care. I couldn't. "You're leaving, aren't you?" I said, each word coming out like a weight. "You're done with me, and you don't even care what it does to this family." Clara opened her mouth to say something, but I wasn't going to let her anymore. "You're not getting away with this," I said, my voice cold. "We're going to deal with this, but on my terms, not yours." Clara's face crumbled. The facade she had been holding up started to slip away, and for the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes. It was real. I don't know what to say," she stammered. You don't have to say anything," I cut her off, stepping back, my own mind reeling. "I've already heard enough." I turned, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to leave. I needed space. I couldn't look at her anymore. "I'll be in the garage," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "We'll talk later, when we're both calm." And without another word, I walked out of the kitchen, past Clara, who stood frozen in the doorway, still unsure of what came next. But I knew. I had already made up my mind, and I wasn't going to let her, or anyone, control the narrative anymore. This was just the beginning. A week had passed since the night I overheard Clara's conversation with Mark. A week of walking around in a fog, pretending everything was fine when nothing was. The house had felt like a hollow shell, and the mask I wore for Natalie and Evan was getting harder to keep up. They didn't know. They couldn't. Clara and I hadn't spoken much. She'd tried a few times to start a conversation, but each time I'd shut her down, too angry to listen, too hurt to engage. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded of that night, her words, her betrayal. And every time I saw her, I saw Mark's face too, hovering just behind hers. I'd barely been able to focus on work. The simulations I usually found challenging but manageable felt like distant noise. All I could think about was the life I had built and how it had just crumbled beneath me. I knew I had to confront Clara, but I wasn't sure when. I wasn't ready to do it while still reeling from the shock, from the betrayal that felt like it hit me from all sides. That afternoon, I walked into the kitchen to find Clara sitting at the table, a file in front of her. The way she looked at me made my skin crawl. She didn't have to say a word. I could see the guilt and the shame in her eyes. But then she spoke, and I could hear the coldness in her voice, even though she tried to hide it. "I thought we could do this the easy way," she said, sliding the file toward me. "I've thought about it a lot, and I don't think we can make this work anymore, Daniel. I'm done. I'm asking for a divorce." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The words didn't sink in right away. The truth was right in front of me. Her divorce papers, the final nail in the coffin of a marriage I thought was built on love, on trust. And yet, Clara was handing me the papers like it was no big deal. I glanced at her face, trying to understand what I was seeing. There was no emotion there, no sign of the woman I'd spent years with. It was like she had already moved on, and here I was, still trapped in a marriage that had never meant what I thought it had. I didn't take the papers right away. Instead, I stood there, staring at the cold, official document that would dismantle everything I had worked for, everything I had built. "So, this is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Clara nodded. "I can't keep living like this, Daniel. I can't keep pretending. You and I both know it's over." I felt a rush of anger surge up in my chest, but I kept it in check. I wasn't going to let her see how much it hurt. I wasn't going to let her think she could control the situation anymore. "I see," I said quietly, my eyes narrowing as I finally picked up the papers. I skimmed through the text, my eyes catching on the terms. "So, what's next? You want to just go ahead and sign these and call it a day?" Clara winced, and for a moment I saw the briefest flicker of regret in her eyes. But it was gone before I could fully register it. "I know this isn't easy for you, Daniel," she said, her voice softening. "But it's time. We've been living in this limbo for too long." I set the papers down and folded my arms across my chest. I couldn't bring myself to sign them. Not yet. I needed control of the situation. I needed to decide how this was going to end, and not on her terms. You don't get to just walk away from everything we've built, I said, my voice steady, but a fire was beginning to spark inside me. You don't get to turn this into something convenient, Clara. I deserve better than that, and so do the kids. Clara's face hardened. Don't bring them into this, Daniel. This isn't about them. It's about us. It's about what we've become. And frankly, I'm done. You should be too. I clenched my fists, but I kept my voice low. I'm not going to just sign this. Not until we've talked it through. Not until we've figured out what comes next. You don't get to just control everything like you always do. Clara stood up, her eyes flashing with frustration. You think I'm controlling? You think I've been controlling all this time? She took a deep breath, her voice growing sharper. Well, I'm sorry, Daniel, but I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to wake up to what's been obvious for years. We're done. I didn't respond right away. I was too angry. I didn't even know what to say. The rage was building up inside me, but it wasn't just anger at her. It was at myself. How had I been so blind to this? How had I let her tear apart everything I'd worked so hard for without even realizing it? I wanted to lash out, to scream, to make her feel the weight of what she had done. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I looked her in the eyes and said, "Fine, but don't think for 1 second that I'm going to let you walk away with everything without a fight." Clara looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with the papers still on the table between us. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how to fight for my family, for my life, for the truth. But I wasn't going to just roll over and let Clara have it all. This was just the beginning, and I was going to make damn sure it didn't end with her getting away scot-free. The next few days felt like a blur. Clara had made her choice, and I had made mine. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table, untouched. But I knew that the time would come when I'd have to deal with it, when the legal reality would set in, and I'd have to face the consequences of everything we'd built and destroyed. But not yet. I needed to think. I needed to plan. And the first step in that plan was figuring out how to expose Clara for who she truly was. She wasn't going to get away with walking out on me, on our kids, and on this life we'd built together without some accountability. Yeah, I couldn't just sit back and let her manipulate everything in her favor. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. She had been playing a game, and I had been a pawn. A paycheck, as she'd so eloquently put it. But I was done being her pawn. So I started thinking strategically. I needed to gather evidence, not just for the divorce, but for custody. I knew Clara well enough to realize that she'd play dirty. She'd spin a story, paint herself as the victim, and try to manipulate the kids. I couldn't let that happen. I spent the next few nights compiling everything, digital evidence. I went through my emails, text messages, and any financial records I could find that would show how long this affair had been going on, how far she was willing to go to cover her tracks, and how deep her betrayal ran. I started with Mark. I wasn't surprised to find that he had ties to a luxury tennis club in town. What surprised me was how easily I was able to gain access to information about the club. The staff was always polite and helpful when I asked questions. As a new member, I'd been told that I was eligible for special privileges. I wasn't really sure what that meant at first, but now I knew. Clara's affair wasn't just an emotional betrayal. It was financial too, and Mark had deep pockets. The more I investigated, the more I uncovered. I found evidence of several other women Clara had been seeing before Mark, and all of them had left behind traces of her manipulative nature. She was good at hiding things, but not good enough. I gathered everything I could, every photo, every text, every record, and organized it into a neat, airtight file. It was a digital dossier, complete with dates, times, and exact details of Clara's relationship with Mark. I could already see how this would play out in court, a story of infidelity, lies, and deceit. But that wasn't enough. I had to dig deeper. I sat down one evening with a notebook and a pen. My thoughts were all over the place, but there was one thing that kept nagging at me: the kids, Natalie and Evan. There was no way I was letting Clara take them from me. The idea of her manipulating them into believing her lies made my blood boil. But there was something else, something I couldn't ignore. I had a gut feeling that the kids might not be mine, not biologically. I had been doubting it for a while, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Clara had always been evasive when it came to details about their conception. The dates didn't line up, And the more I recalled, the more it seemed like I was a second-choice father, a placeholder. The thought ate at me, but I couldn't just confront Clara about it. Not yet. I had to be sure. So I took another step. I ordered DNA tests for both Natalie and Evan. It wasn't easy, especially considering how much I'd already been hiding from Clara, but I knew it had to be done. It would be my final ace in the hole, a way to ensure that my children wouldn't be manipulated into thinking I wasn't their father, biologically or otherwise. I didn't know when the results would come back, but I couldn't wait. Every minute felt like a waste, like I was standing still while Clara continued with her lies, her manipulations. The kids had been confused, especially Natalie. I could tell she was sensing something wasn't right, but I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. I didn't want to put that weight on her shoulders. And Evan, he was still too young, too innocent to understand the magnitude of the betrayal. But I would protect them both. I would protect them from Clara's games, from whatever twisted narrative she tried to create. As I sat there in the living room, staring at the file of evidence I had put together, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Determination. I wasn't going to let her take everything. I wasn't going to let her walk away scot-free. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about getting my family back, about showing Clara that I wasn't the fool she thought I was, and I wasn't going to lose. I made a vow to myself then. I would fight for Natalie, for Evan, for everything I had built with Clara, no matter how much it hurt to admit it was all falling apart. I just had to hold on a little longer. The DNA results came in exactly 1 week later. The moment I saw the email in my inbox, I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse. Part of me didn't want to open it. What if it confirmed my fears? What if everything I believed about my children, about my role in their lives, was a lie? But I couldn't stop myself. I clicked the link. The results were clear. Neither Natalie nor Evan was biologically mine. I stared at the screen, the words swimming in front of my eyes. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I had been prepared for this, but no amount of preparation could shield me from the gut punch of seeing it in black and white. The truth was finally laid bare, and I felt something I hadn't expected, a deep, aching sadness mixed with a sense of betrayal so raw I could barely breathe. It wasn't just Clara who had lied to me. It was Natalie and Evan too, though they didn't know it. The kids had always felt like mine. I had been there for every scraped knee, every school recital, every late-night homework session. I had been their father in every way that mattered. But now, this truth, this biological fact, was hanging over me like a shadow, pulling me further away from them. I sat there for what felt like hours, the silence in the house pressing down on me. The idea that I wasn't their father, at least not by blood, was something I hadn't wanted to face. But there it was. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to make sense of everything. I was their father. I had raised them, loved them, protected them. Blood didn't change that. But the realization still hurt. It shook me to my core. I had to confront this. I had to figure out what this meant for my future with them, for my custody battle with Clara. The anger wasn't there yet. Maybe it would come later, but right now, all I could feel was numb. The one thing I had always trusted, this idea of family, of shared history, had been called into question. I had to keep it together, though. I couldn't let this destroy me. I couldn't let Clara see the cracks in my armor. Not yet. Not when I was so close to taking control of the situation. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone. I needed to talk to someone who could offer perspective. I called Lydia. She was the one person who had been there for me during this whole ordeal, even if she didn't know the full extent of it. Lydia, a journalist I had met at a conference months ago, was sharp, grounded, and honest in ways I had come to appreciate. She had a way of cutting through the noise and getting straight to the heart of the matter. "Hey, Lydia," I said when she answered. My voice was a little shakier than I wanted it to be. "I need to talk." "What's going on?" she asked, her tone immediate, concerned. I explained everything, the discovery about the affair, Clara's coldness, and now the paternity test results. Lydia listened without interruption, her silence on the other end of the line giving me space to spill out the anger, sadness, and disbelief I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. When I finished, there was a long pause. Lydia spoke carefully, her voice calm but firm. "Daniel, none of this changes what you've been to them. You're their father. What you've built with them, love, trust, care, that's what matters. Blood? It doesn't define family. But I get it. This is a hard pill to swallow. You need to process it, but you also need to keep your eyes on the bigger picture here. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Her words made sense, but the hurt was still there, lingering. I know, but it changes everything, doesn't it? Maybe, but it also doesn't change your ability to fight for them. It doesn't change the love they have for you. That's what I needed to hear. The idea that my relationship with Natalie and Evan wasn't contingent on blood was a hard one to accept, but it was the truth. My bond with them was real. My fight for them would be just as real. Thanks, Lydia, I said, my voice steadier now. I needed that. No problem. You're going to need a good lawyer, though, she added with a touch of humor. I know a few. I chuckled despite myself. I'll keep that in mind. After hanging up with Lydia, I sat there for a while, processing everything. The paternity results didn't change what I had to do. They didn't change the fact that Clara's betrayal had torn apart my family. They didn't change my responsibility to protect my kids. And they didn't change my resolve. In fact, they only made me more determined. That night, I spent hours drafting a plan. I mapped out the evidence I had against Clara and Mark, the records of their affair, and the undeniable proof of her manipulation. I would use everything I had in court, and I would make sure that I was the one walking away with custody of the kids. The truth about the paternity didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It was a technicality, a piece of information that would give Clara no advantage in court. What mattered was that I had raised those children. What mattered was that I loved them, and I would do whatever it took to keep them safe. That was the only truth I needed to hold on to. And that night, as I sat in the quiet of my home, staring at the results, I realized that the war wasn't over yet. The fight for my family had just begun, and I wasn't going to lose, not this time. The plan had been brewing in my mind for days. I needed to hit Clara where it would hurt the most. Her carefully constructed image, her affair with Mark, and the way she thought she could get away with everything. But I wasn't going to confront her directly. No, I was going to do something far more public, something that would make her feel the weight of her betrayal in front of everyone. It all came together when I found out that Clara and Mark were dining at a high-end restaurant in the city, a place that had been my go-to spot for years, a place that, ironically, I had taken Clara to when we first started dating, a place where we'd celebrated anniversaries and special occasions together. It seemed like the perfect place for the final act in my strategy. I called the restaurant earlier that day, making sure everything was set. I'd be arriving at the same time they were, sitting at a table just a few feet away from theirs. I wasn't going to let them enjoy their night in peace. I was going to make sure they knew the consequences of what they'd done, and that meant doing it in front of an audience. By the time I arrived at the restaurant, I felt a strange mixture of nerves and resolve. I was putting everything on the line, but I knew it was the right thing to do. If Clara thought she could walk away from everything without facing the fallout, she had another thing coming. I sat down at my table, ordered a drink, and waited. The restaurant's atmosphere was as I remembered it. Elegant, soft lighting, the hum of conversations filling the air. But I couldn't focus on any of that. My eyes were fixed on the entrance, where Clara and Mark would soon walk in. And then, there they were. Clara, dressed in a sleek black dress, her smile bright and carefree, as if everything was normal. Mark was beside her, his hand resting on her back, his demeanor confident, as if he had nothing to hide. They made their way to a table just a few feet away from mine, laughing and chatting like a couple who had nothing to fear. I waited until they had settled in before I made my move. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. I'd come this far, and I wasn't going to back down now. I stood up slowly and walked toward their table, the sound of my footsteps cutting through the low murmur of conversation. Clara and Mark didn't notice me at first, too caught up in their own world. But I could see Clara's expression shift as she saw me approaching. Her eyes widened, and she stopped mid-sentence. "Daniel," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, though it wasn't a kind one. "Oh, just enjoying a nice dinner," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I see you two are enjoying yourselves too." Mark looked between Clara and me, clearly trying to gauge the situation, but he was caught off guard, unsure of what to do. I pulled a manila envelope from my jacket pocket and placed it on the table between them, right in front of Clara. She stared at it for a moment, her expression unreadable. "What's this?" she asked, her voice flat. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I leaned in slightly, my gaze fixed on her. You might want to open it, I said quietly. You're going to want to see what's inside. There was a tense moment of silence before Clara slowly reached for the envelope. She hesitated for just a second before opening it, her fingers shaking slightly as she unfolded the papers inside. The shock on her face was instant. Her eyes darted back and forth as she read the contents, and I saw her face pale, her expression flickering between disbelief and fear. Mark leaned forward to see what was in the envelope, his brow furrowing as he scanned the pages. Clara looked up at me, her face crumpling with frustration and panic. "Daniel, what is this? Why are you doing this?" I stayed calm, my tone level. "It's the truth, Clara. Everything I've gathered on you and Mark, the affair, the lies, the manipulation. You thought you could just sweep it under the rug, but I wasn't going to let you, not after everything." I leaned back, watching them both, my gaze never leaving Clara's face. The reality of it hit her hard. I could see her scrambling, trying to process what was happening, trying to regain control of the situation. But she couldn't. Not this time. Mark looked back at her, his face reddening with anger. "You're going to ruin everything, Clara," he muttered under his breath, his voice rising. "What the hell is this?" Clara didn't respond. She just stared at the papers, her hands gripping them tightly. I could see the panic growing in her eyes. She was unraveling, and I was enjoying every second of it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it was the first time I was taking control. "Daniel, please," Clara said, her voice quiet now, desperate. "You don't have to do this. Let's talk about this." "Oh, we are talking," I replied, my voice sharp. "But there's nothing left to discuss. You've already made your choice." I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, Mark stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over in the process. "You think this is over?" he shouted. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning, Daniel." I didn't look back. "No, Mark," I said, turning just enough to glance at him. "This is the end, for you and Clara both." With that, I walked away, leaving them at their table, stunned, humiliated, and exposed for all to see. As I headed for the exit, I heard Clara's voice calling after me, but I didn't stop. I'd made my point, and from here on out, it was only going to get worse for her. But for me, it was the beginning of something new, something better, and I was ready for it. The courtroom was everything I had expected, and nothing like I'd imagined. It was cold, sterile, and the air was thick with tension. I sat at the plaintiff's table, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Clara and her attorney sat across from me, their eyes cold and calculating. She hadn't spoken to me since the dinner at the restaurant, and I hadn't spoken to her either. The silence between us was deafening, but I knew this was the only way forward. I had everything I needed, the evidence of her affair with Mark, the years of financial support, and the digital file I had carefully compiled. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything Clara had done to undermine me, to destroy our family. It was about what I had been to the kids, what I still was, a father, their father. But Clara wasn't going to make this easy. She had already filed for divorce, and now she was fighting for custody of Natalie and Evan. She'd do anything to win, anything. I glanced at my lawyer, Daniel. He was flipping through the files, preparing his arguments. His calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the boiling anger I felt inside, but I appreciated his focus. He knew this was going to be a battle. I could see it in his eyes. The judge, an older man with a no-nonsense expression, called the court to order, and we all stood. I barely registered the formalities. All I could think about was the kids. "Mr. Ward," the judge said, looking at me as we all sat down. "We're here to determine the custody arrangement for your 2 children, as well as address the divorce filings. Please state your case." I nodded, my throat dry. This was it. The moment I had prepared for. The moment I'd thought about for days. Daniel stood up first, speaking in a clear, authoritative tone. "Your Honor, we are here to ensure that Mr. Ward, who has been the primary caregiver and provider for his children, is granted full custody. We will be presenting evidence of the defendant's infidelity and her inability to act in the best interest of the children." I kept my eyes on the judge, my hands folded in my lap. I had to stay calm. I had to remain focused. Clara's lawyer, a slick middle-aged man named Harold, stood up next, his voice smooth and practiced. "Your Honor, we request joint custody. Mrs. Ward has been an active, loving parent, and the children are doing well under her care. Mr. Ward's claims of infidelity are an attempt to tarnish her character. but they do not reflect her ability to care for her children. I could feel Clara's eyes on me, but I didn't look at her. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much she still affected me. The judge nodded, making some notes on his notepad. I will allow both sides to present their evidence. We will take a short recess before continuing. Please, Mr. Ward, proceed with your evidence. Daniel stood and moved toward the front of the courtroom, where a projector was set up to display the documents. I could see Clara fidgeting, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. I knew she wasn't prepared for what was coming. The first piece of evidence was the financial records, showing how I had paid for nearly every aspect of the family's life. The mortgage, the utilities, the kids' private school tuition, all of it was laid bare for the court to see. There was no denying that I had supported the family, no denying that I had been present. Then came the emails and texts between Clara and Mark, along with screenshots of their conversations. The affair had lasted far longer than Clara had admitted, and the evidence showed just how deep it went. I had the dates, the messages, everything. It was damning, but I knew it wasn't just the affair that would win me custody. It was everything I had done for Natalie and Evan. I could feel Clara's tension growing as the evidence piled up. She shifted in her seat, trying to hide her discomfort, but I could see it in the way she gripped the edge of the table. She wasn't used to being exposed like this. Daniel spoke again, presenting the final piece of evidence. The DNA tests for both Natalie and Evan. My heart clenched in my chest as the results were shown on the screen. Your Honor, Daniel said, his voice steady. These results confirm that Mr. Ward is not the biological father of either child. However, he has been their father in every way that counts. He has raised them, loved them, and provided for them. He has been their primary caregiver and is the only stable figure in their lives right now. I felt a tightness in my chest as I looked at the judge. The truth was laid out in front of him. No matter what Clara tried to say, no matter how she tried to spin the narrative, I was the one who had been there for the kids. I was the one they knew as Dad. Clara's lawyer stood up and objected, his voice rising. Your Honor, while these results are shocking, they are irrelevant. Mr. Ward's relationship with the children is still that of a stepfather. Mrs. Ward has been the primary caregiver for both children, and it's in their best interest to remain with her. I felt my blood boil, the nerve of him. But Daniel was quick to respond. Your Honor, the children's best interests are at stake here. Mr. Ward has been the father figure in their lives since birth. He has supported them emotionally, physically, and financially. We believe it is in their best interest to remain with the parent who has shown stability, love, and care. Mrs. Ward has not demonstrated the same commitment. The judge listened carefully, taking notes. He didn't rush to make a decision. Instead, he turned to Clara, asking, Mrs. Ward, do you have anything to say in response to the evidence presented? Clara stood up, her face pale, but she tried to mask it with a well-practiced expression of calm. Your Honor, I acknowledge the evidence, but I ask you to consider that Mr. Ward's accusations are an attempt to tarnish my reputation. I have always been a loving mother, and I continue to be so. My children need me, and I will continue to provide for them, just as I always have. Her words were smooth, rehearsed, but they didn't hold weight, not anymore. The judge paused, considering everything laid out in front of him. After a long moment, he spoke. I will take all the evidence into consideration. We will reconvene tomorrow morning to continue this hearing. The room was thick with tension as the gavel came down. I stood up, feeling a sense of accomplishment mixed with relief. The evidence was on my side. I wasn't going to let Clara manipulate this court. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of the battle lift just a little. I still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the path to winning this fight. For me, for Natalie and Evan, and this time, Clara wouldn't be able to take it from me. 6 months had passed since the courtroom battle. The dust had settled, and things had started to find their rhythm. I still couldn't believe how quickly everything had changed. Clara had fought hard, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge had awarded me full custody of Natalie and Evan, and Clara had walked away with little more than a portion of the house and some of the assets we'd accumulated during our marriage. I didn't take pleasure in her loss. No, this was about something else. It was about what was best for the kids. It was about stability, and I was going to provide that for them, no matter what. The first few months were tough. The kids missed their mom, and I could see how hard it was for them to adjust to this new reality. They acted like everything was normal, but I could tell it wasn't. Evan was quiet, withdrawn, and Natalie's smile didn't reach her eyes the way it used to. I tried to keep their routines intact: school, meals, weekend outings. But nothing was truly the same. It was in those quiet moments, when I'd catch Evan staring out the window or find Natalie curled up with a book, that I realized how much they had been affected by all of this, and how much I had to do to make things right. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined to give them the kind of life they deserved. One where they didn't have to feel the weight of my mistakes, of Clara's betrayal. That's when I decided it was time to change things up. No more just getting through the days. No more letting the tension hang in the air. It was time for us to create new memories, ones that were full of joy, ones where we could all just be a family again. So I started small. I got us a dog, a golden retriever puppy. Evan, who had always wanted a dog, was the most excited. We named her Daisy, and she quickly became a part of the family. She had this way of brightening up the house, of making us all forget, if only for a few minutes, the shadows that had loomed over us. But it wasn't just about the dog. It was about the way we started spending time together, real time. I started taking them out on weekends for science museums, hiking trips, and even spontaneous visits to the local park. Things I hadn't done before, when I was caught up in the stress of work and my broken marriage. But now, I made it a point to be present, to show them that they mattered more than anything else. I watched Natalie start to open up again. She began talking about her school projects, about the robotics team she had joined. And Evan, who had once been so reserved, started coming to me with questions about science experiments he wanted to try. I loved it. I loved seeing them come back to life, bit by bit, despite everything they had gone through. One evening, after a long week of school and work, I decided to surprise them. I had picked up pizza from their favorite spot, and we were sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by open boxes and laughter, the dog curled up beside us. The TV was on, but no one was really watching it. We were just enjoying each other's company, the way it used to be, and that's when it hit me. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. We were living. Together. That's when the doorbell rang. I opened it, surprised to see Lydia standing there, a warm smile on her face. "Hey," she said, looking casual in jeans and a t-shirt. "Got a minute?" "Of course," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "What's going on?" She glanced around a little hesitantly before smiling at me. "It's funny," she said. "I've been meaning to check in on you guys. You know, to see how things are going, how you're doing." I smiled back, though I could feel a little tension in my shoulders. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed her until I saw her standing there, just being herself. She had become a good friend over the past few months, someone I could talk to when the weight of everything felt too heavy. "I'm doing better," I said, feeling the honesty of it. "Really, I've been figuring things out." Lydia nodded. "I'm glad to hear that. You've done a hell of a job, Daniel. You've kept this family together when everything was falling apart." I glanced over my shoulder at the kids who were busy sharing a slice of pizza. "I'm just trying to give them something real again," I said, my voice quiet. "Something to hold on to." Lydia's eyes softened as she stepped closer. "You've already given them that, but I'm glad you're taking care of yourself too." I smiled, feeling a little embarrassed. "I'm still figuring that part out." "You don't have to figure it out alone, you know," Lydia said gently. "You're doing great, Daniel, and I think you've earned a little bit of happiness." For the first time in what felt like forever, I actually believed her. We stood there for a moment, just taking in the quiet peace of the room, the kids laughing, the dog wagging her tail in the corner, and the weight of the past slowly lifting. It was a moment I wasn't ready to let go of. Lydia spoke again, breaking the silence. "You know, there's something I've been thinking about. You've done all this work, rebuilding everything with the kids, and I think maybe it's time to think about rebuilding something for yourself." I met her gaze, surprised by the depth of her words. "What do you mean?" She smiled softly. "I think it's time you started thinking about you, Daniel. Not just as a father, not just as someone who's been hurt, but as someone who deserves something good. And maybe that something is right in front of you." Her words hit me hard, deeper than I expected. I didn't know what the future held, but standing here with Lydia in front of me and the kids behind me, I felt like I had the strength to face it. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I wasn't sure what that meant yet, or how it would look, but I knew it was something worth pursuing, something that felt real. I walked back into the living room, Lydia beside me. The kids looked up, noticing her for the first time. "Hey guys," I said with a grin. "This is Lydia. She's been a big help to me these past few months." They both smiled, Natalie a little more reserved than Evan, but they both nodded in acknowledgement. "We were just about to watch a movie," Natalie said, holding up the remote. "You want to join us?" Lydia looked at me with a smile, as if this was just another step towards something better, something new. And for once, I didn't hesitate. "Sure," I said. "I think I'd like that." And so, just like that, we settled into the couch. As the movie played and the dog snuggled up to us, I realized that, for the first time, I wasn't just trying to survive. I was building a new life, piece by piece. And this time, I was going to make sure it was one worth living. A year had passed since the courtroom battle. A year since everything had come crashing down. And yet, here I was, standing in my kitchen, looking out the window at the quiet street. The sun was setting, casting a soft golden light across the yard, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. The kids were out back with Daisy, the dog I'd gotten for them 6 months after everything fell apart. I watched them run around laughing, free of the weight of the past. For the first time in so long, it felt like our house had truly become a home again. In a way, it had all come full circle. The last year hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, moments where I felt like everything was falling apart again. But in the end, we had made it through. Natalie and Evan were thriving. They were happy, they were healthy, and they were with me. Clara had moved to another city for a new job, and I hadn't heard from her since the final court hearing. The last time I saw her was when she signed the divorce papers. It was a cold, silent exchange, and she hadn't looked me in the eye once. I'd walked out of that courthouse feeling like I was shedding an old skin. As for Lydia, well, that was a different story. We'd kept in touch throughout the year, and slowly we'd gotten closer. It started with simple conversations, then occasional dinners, and then longer weekends together. She was understanding, kind, and supportive in ways I hadn't even realized I needed. There was no pressure, no expectation. Just the two of us, figuring things out as we went. And now, here we were. Lydia and I had been seeing each other for a few months when we both realized that what we had was something real, something that had grown naturally, without the weight of baggage or old mistakes. It felt good. No, it felt right. I glanced over at the table where I had placed the ring. It wasn't much, a simple band, nothing flashy, nothing extravagant. Just something that felt like a symbol of everything I had fought for, everything I was building with Lydia. Yes, I'd thought about this moment for a while. A quiet dinner with the kids, a peaceful evening after a long week of work, and then, when the time felt right, asking Lydia to join our little family, to be a part of this new beginning we had created together. But first, there was something I had to do. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It was just about time for the kids to come in and get ready for dinner. But before that, I tapped on the message from Clara that had arrived earlier that day. It wasn't much, just a simple note, but it was enough to make me pause. "Daniel, I hope you're well. I know it's been a long time, but I wanted to send you a quick message to say that I'm sorry. I don't expect anything from you, but I hope that someday you'll understand why I made the choices I did. I'll always be grateful for the years we had together, and for the kids. Take care of them, and take care of yourself." I stared at the message for a moment, then tapped out a reply. It wasn't angry, and it wasn't bitter. It was just closure. "Thank you, Clara. I'm doing well. The kids are great. I've moved on. I hope you find peace too. Take care." I hit send and put the phone down, feeling a strange sense of relief. That chapter of my life was closed. There was nothing more to say. Just then, the back door opened, and Natalie and Evan ran inside, laughing and shouting about something Daisy had done. I smiled, the warmth in my chest spreading as I watched them. They were mine, in every sense of the word. Not biologically, perhaps, but in every way that mattered, and I would protect them for the rest of my life. Lydia followed them in a moment later, her eyes lighting up when she saw me standing there with the ring. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft, yet carrying the weight of something unspoken. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "Everything's perfect." I glanced over at the kids who had already forgotten whatever they were talking about and were now piling into the kitchen, ready for dinner. Lydia smiled, and in that moment, I knew I was ready. I knew what this next chapter of my life would look like. "Let's sit down for dinner," I said, my heart beating a little faster. "And after, I want to ask you something." Lydia raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting until we had all gathered around the table. We ate together as a family, the conversation light and easy. For the first time in a long time, the weight of the past felt distant. It was just us, Lydia, me, and the kids. After dinner, as we moved to the living room, I took a deep breath and turned to Lydia, who was sitting on the couch with a book in her hands. "Lydia," I started, my voice calm, though my heart was pounding. "This past year has been one of the hardest of my life, but it's also been one of the most rewarding. I've watched the kids grow. I've rebuilt my life, and I couldn't have done any of it without you." She looked up at me, her eyes soft and understanding. "I've spent so much of my life thinking I had to handle everything on my own," I continued. "But the truth is, I don't want to do this alone anymore. I want you to be a part of our family. I want you to be part of my life, for real. And—" I paused, reaching for the ring in my pocket. "Will you marry me?" Lydia's eyes widened in surprise. She looked at the ring, then back at me, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. "Yes," she said softly, her smile spreading wide across her face. "Yes, of course." The kids cheered, not understanding fully what was going on, but happy for us nonetheless. Lydia laughed, shaking her head. "I'm glad you didn't ask while they were still outside. I'm not sure I could have said yes with all that noise." I chuckled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "We'll get used to it. We're a family now." We hugged, the weight of everything falling away in that moment. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't without its scars, but I had rebuilt something beautiful, and this time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living, and the best part, I didn't have to do it alone anymore. As I looked around the room, at Lydia, at Natalie, at Evan, I knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The past was behind me, and the future had never looked brighter.